Good afternoon. So we are here to discuss about the return on investment and the importance of modernization. What is modernization and things like that, right? So before we get started, let me take a quick minute to introduce myself and Pritam, who's on the call. So my name is Bharath Yaragatti. I am the VP for Customer Engineering here at Niveus Solutions. We are a premier Google partner and recently been recognized as the Breakthrough Partner of the Year for the Asia Pacific, especially in the modernization space, which includes application infra as well as data modernization, right? And we are also partners with Looker, APG, and Palo Alto for the Prisma Cloud implementation. And with that, we also have Pritam here with us, who's a partner engineer from Google Cloud and who's been working with a lot of clients in the space of application modernizations. And he'll be here to share with us, on various challenges, the kind of best practices, and why modernization is important, and a couple of case studies on it, right? So I think with that, we can get started, right? So let's start with the basic, question of, what is modernization, right? If you see at different eras, different things meant modernization during that particular point of time, right? So initially, when the whole digitization started, there were punch cards, and then there was bare metal, right? And then conversion from bare metal and a switch to basically virtual machines was called modernization in those times. And today we are talking about, making that shift from virtual machines to containerized applications, containerized images, which we call as modernization today, right? So shift has been happening continuously. It will continue to happen. So today, when we talk about modernization, we are basically predominantly focusing on the switch between virtual machines to containers and how this is going to help the industry, the clients, the customers, the overall software, applications as such is something which we can look at, right? So basically, in this whole changes and is the constant, right? That's the only thing which we know, which has been changing throughout, and accordingly, how can we make our applications or our workloads, into a perpetual modernized applications, which are kind of reluctant or which are shielded from any kind of a technological change that might happen, and they can still continue to perform and cater and scale and as per the expectations, irrespective of the evolving cloud, right? Or the load. So that's what we term as the perpetual modernization. So this is what, in a nutshell, modernization would stand for, right? One is to have those applications which are agnostic of the underlying infrastructure, whether it's on-prem, whether it's public cloud, whether it's Google Cloud, whatever it is. How can we build applications, or how can we modernize the existing applications to make them, break them from any kind of a tie-up or a lock-in that they have with the underlying infrastructure, right? Next is, how can I innovate at speed? How can I keep on pushing new features to the market without really being tied down by the traditional ways of software development, which is to take months together to even make a patch release, or even take a new feature to the market before it undergoes all the checks and the testing, etc., right? How can I make this in a real time? Next is, how can I meet every demand anytime, right? Where can I, irrespective from where my coders are, where the people are developing these applications, how can they integrate, collaborate to bring this innovative features to the market so that you can beat the competition? Next is, how can I get the whole observability of my applications? So basically, when we're talking about modernization, we're talking about microservices, containers. There will be millions and millions of containers that would get hosted. Google themselves host a lot of millions of containers on a daily basis. How do I get a view or a control or a dashboard where I can see what is happening at each of this container? How are they scaling up? The monitoring aspect of it becomes a prime component in the modernization journey, right? Next is, how can I automate? Right, a lot of deployment cycles. CI/CD has been there for a while. DevOps has been there for a while. How can I automate within this to make them more efficient, where I can reach a stage where I can make multiple production releases per day, right, without really impacting the existing load, which is consuming my applications. Right? So these kind of form the 5 main pillars of modernization, right? This is from source from McKinsey, right, where there are a lot of legacy systems, there are a lot of applications. We will discuss about the challenges in that, but right, and they're surviving, they're able to perform, they're able to cater to the load that they have today, and they may question, why do I need to modernize? Right, I already have an application, already have my workloads on my data centers which are doing their job. So what is the need for me to modernize? the reason there is to disrupt, because there are a lot of incumbent business models which are new digital models that have been coming into the market, right, which are cloud born companies which already have modernized architecture for their workloads, and they are going to scale much easily than the traditional monolithic applications, right? So if the organizations do not adopt or adapt to this particular change and modernize their workloads, soon these new digital business models will take over. And that's the kind of high level implication of this particular graph, which I took from the McKinsey report, right? So before we get into the details of the modernization piece, let's see how do I, okay, let's say now I want to modernize my applications. How do I measure it? So here is a simple MODRN hashtag modern framework that we are looking at, right? So basically, these are some of the components which will help you measure your modernized applications, right? Where do I stand? So release cycle. Am I able to release these bug fixes to the production? What is the rate at which I'm able to release it without impacting my existing customers? What is the frequency of this releases I'm able to do per day? What is the lead time for me to move this business critical application, from a UAT or a development to production, right? Next is how am I don't have to procure all the servers required and have my applications hosted on a data center. How am I in an optimized way utilizing what the cloud has to offer so that my overall IT spend is within the scope, right? Are my applications able to scale? Let's say tomorrow there is a dynamic load. Maybe you have applications which have on which the shareholders are buying, trading shares. Yesterday we saw a massive surge in the IRCTC shares, right? Within 2 hours it went up and fell down by 900 points. And you imagine the kind of volume at which the trading happened. And let's say you're a company which has this application and you have hosted it on your data centers and servers without being able to predict that kind of load. Would your system scale to cater this kind of an unexpected load? That's what we call as dynamic scalability, right? Infrastructure change quotient. So what is the percentage of structural change required in order to double the workloads, which is again a kind of a measure which we need to take in order to anticipate the kind of dynamic load that can come in. Next is the reliability quotient, right, where the security at the development layer, the security at your network, your application, at your container level, to what level is it compliant? And of course, depending on the kind of workloads that you have, are you HIPAA compliant, GDSR compliant, ISO certified, etc., is something that needs to be taken care of, right? And then, of course, the net availability ratio, as we call it, right? What is the application failure rate? What is the MTT? What is the MTTR? All these eventually, if we set a benchmark and if we have to measure it, then we can set ourselves a range on what my application modernization is going to achieve, right? So you may ask, okay, I have legacy applications, I have legacy workloads which are running. So how do I begin my modernization journey, right? So it starts off with the we and Google Cloud can come together here and say, first it starts off with the discovery, where we understand where your as is ecosystem, your as is challenges, the integration points, the criticality of these applications. Sorry. The need to maintain a status quo in some of these applications while we modernize them, then come up with a technical and an architectural design that can scale, and then plan for the project implementation, and then put together this whole peak, and then get into the managed service part of it, right? So we have a detailed plan in how we work with our clients, where we assess them, come up with a questionnaire-based approach to identify, let's say you have n number of applications, which of these are low-hanging fruits, where we can look at modernizing them and see what the modernized applications have to offer before we take up, the next slightly complex or more dependent systems, and then leverage what the best modernization has to offer, right? So this is what we call as the 7 R's, right? So not everything needs to be modernized, right? If we have a traditional organizations which have applications which were, I have been working with some of the clients which still have, applications built in COBOL, right? Imagine now the time has come when for them the modernization could even mean, simply retiring that application and then building a new application altogether, right? So this is the area where we predominantly help our clients to understand, okay, we assess each of their workloads and then we decide which of them needs to be retained as is, like I said, for status quo or for compliance part of it, or from preserving the customers, data privacy part of it, which requires the law of the land requires it to be on premises. So yes, definitely we'll have to retain them. Which of these needs to be retired? Are we using these applications enough? Which of these have to be, completely left out, and we need to build new scalable applications for this? right? Which of these applications can be rehosted? You don't have to modernize all the applications, right? Some of the basic applications which are being hosted, if you can just move them, what we call as simple lift and shift from on-premises to cloud as a first step in adoption of cloud, that itself would solve the problem, right? Which of these can be re-platformed? Which of these can be refactored? Which of this can be replaced, probably with the SaaS or records kind of applications, and which of these needs to be rebuilt? Now, when we talk about application modernization, we are focusing on this rebuild part of it, right? While this will help us identify which of these need to be modernized, modernization comes here, where we break down monolithic legacy, tightly coupled architecture into smaller chunks of microservices, which are then hosted on containers and then orchestrated by, tools like Kubernetes, right? So these are the 4 steps approach, like I was telling, right? It starts with the discovery where we understand what your current workloads are, what is the ecosystem that's there. We run an assessment using tools like Stratazone, right, which will give the kind of consumption that you have on premises and what can be done in order to modernize this. Then we come up with the whole deploy and migrate strategy where we say that, okay, these are the ones that needs to be rebuilt. How do we set up a landing zone, right? How do we set up the whole cloud governance layer, right? How do we set up the monitoring, the alerts, etc. Right? Then do a couple of them which need to be rehosted. How do we do a lift and shift to the cloud? Then comes the third piece, which we would have identified under the rebuild part of it, right? After replacing, refactoring, re-engineering, we will start rebuilding this. This is where we start using the managed services like Google Kubernetes Engine, right? The infrastructure as a code, orchestration of these containers, and then we can start monitoring all these things, right? Once we have taken your workloads, the traditional ones, and then we have migrated and modernized them, the next key important thing is managing these, right? A lot of organizations which are focused on building features, adding value to the customers, might not necessarily have skill set which is pertaining to modernization, right? And that is not even their core area of business. Any mature organization wouldn't need to have a team which is helping them maintain their services. That's where the managed services of what Google Cloud has to offer is beautiful, right? So once we have modernized these things, a lot of them would be running in an autopilot mode. You would need a very small team, basically the dashboards once constructed, they are self-managing in nature, but yes, you would need some kind of skill set to have the right set of tools deployed to monitor this. That's why, the managed service also becomes an important part once you have modernized your applications. So this is predominantly what we cover or what comes into picture when we say deploy and migrate, right? It's about your migrating your VMs. It's about having a whole hybrid cloud setup. When I say hybrid, like I said, for compliance reasons, you may have to have some of your workloads still on premises and some of them being hosted on cloud. But how can I manage all these things from one single control plane? So that's where Anthos comes into picture. I'll talk about that in the next slides, right? Then next, there is infrastructure as a code. How can I automate, for example, a DR setup automation, right? Using wonderful tools like Terraform and Ansible is something which we can do. That's what IAC is. That's what infrastructure modernization is. How do I optimize my containers? How do I kind of orchestrate my containers? This becomes an important factor. Then like I said, infrastructure monitoring. There are enough managed services tools available within the Google ecosystem to do the monitoring. Right? And then, of course, implementation of the end-to-end cloud security at all layers. Okay. So this is about it. Database migrations, containerization of applications, building scalable applications, serverless solutions, modernization of your CI/CD pipeline, and canary deployment. So all these things are possible using a single. So basically, Anthos is not one single software solution, right? It's a combination of multiple things that has been created by Google to amplify your whole modernization journey, right? How do we? Sorry. Yeah. So how do we do it? As something like this, right? Anthos is a combination of your service mesh, which is ASTO. It's a combination of your on-premises Google Kubernetes engine, which is again a managed service of Kubernetes engine, and your marketplace and your config manager, right? So basically what it does is you can build, deploy your applications, any of this multi-cloud or a hybrid cloud kind of setup, and control right from the building of it, deploying of it, monitoring of it from a single control plane called as Anthos. Right. So this is an end-to-end solution for application modernizations that Google brings into place, which we have been implementing for a couple of our clients. Right. See, again, these are none of these are very tightly coupled, and there is no mandate to use all these features. Right. You could have your own GitHub, instead of having cloud source repositories. Right. You can have, instead of cloud build, you can use Jenkins to do that. You can have your own registry. right? And you can use your own tools to do the, to run your builds, right? And you can have your own SRE systems, or you can use all the managed services available within the Google ecosystem to modernize and manage your, workloads which have been modernized using Anthos. So that's the power of Anthos, right? So this is the approach, right? So again, I'm just trying to simplify when I said what is modernization, right? Where this is rebuild part of it, this is the refactor part of it, or redeploy part of it, right? So traditional applications were either on-prem and their legacy with monolithic architecture. So the way to modernize them is either you first lift and shift to cloud, and then you slowly modernize, right? Or you modernize and then move. Or the other way of doing it is you modernize within on-premises, that is by using on-prem GKE and all, by deploying your containers within your data centers. And then eventually, once you decide on a cloud strategy, is where you move to the, you lift and shift them to the modernized workloads itself to the cloud, right? So yeah, like I said, once that is there, the cloud managed service takes care of your availability, your performance, your change management, the alerting of it, which is very customizable. You can set up all these alerts from a single dashboard. Your leadership can have a view of it. Your admin team can have a view of it, right? Your whole MTTR and MTT can be increased. Your capacity planning can be increased, and so can be your efficiency, right? So these are some of the case studies that quickly I would like to talk about where we have done this, right? So we were working with one of the large private bank in India where they had a lot of these legacy systems hosted on premises, right? And of course, the core banking system till date, almost all the banks in India have their core banking systems on premises, right? The challenge to take them to cloud is more enormous there because of the massiveness of the whole core banking system that is there. I've spent almost 10 years in Finacle, so I can say it's not a very easy thing to do. Eventually, yes, that is the future, but migrating whether it's Temenos or whether it's FlexCube or whether it's Banks 2000, moving a core banking system to cloud is going to take time. So what we did here was instead we started building applications, let's say for easy onboarding of customers on cloud. Right, and we had a very beautiful modernized architecture here where all the new APIs, new services that we are building were microservices hosted on Google Cloud, orchestrated by Kubernetes, which would interact with the APIs of the core banking solutions, which were on-prem, which were exposed through the API management platform called EPG. So it's a very hybrid setup, right? You have EPG, you have on-premises core banking and the APIs for account opening, for transactions, etc. exposed. And here we are building the modern onboarding, mobile or web applications or progressive web applications where customers can, scan their Aadhaar, scan their PAN card, and all the details are captured. They key in a few more details. They digitally sign this. They even it's integrated with payment systems for making payments if it's a loan application. And in 4 to 5 minutes flat, you have your savings account ready for you to start transacting. And then we were able to build this, and then let's say we kind of had a digital platform built for onboarding, which we could then use for fixed deposit, for loans, for salary loans, for salary accounts, and so on and so forth, right? We are in the process of building onboarding close to 40 to 50 different products onto the same modernized platform, right? And this was some of the metrics. I think these are slightly older. They're from Jan 2021. In spite of pandemic, the bank was able to open close to 1,000 accounts per day because we were able to deploy this modernized application on Google Cloud, with the hybrid setup, integrating it with their on-premises core banking solution, right? The second use case is LIC Housing Finance, which they did not really have it. So here it was not a case of modernizing legacy applications. Here is where we deployed or we built or we implemented a modernized application for them, right? Which is a mobile application as well as a web application. Again, onboarding of this is a unique one where the agents can also log in and raise requests for loans on behalf of their clients, track it. The existing customers can log in and download their repayment certificate, make the EMI payments that they have missed, download a lot of things. There is a chatbot integration here, and all this is hosted on Google Cloud. While in the backend, they still have their core loan origination system, which is still hosted on premises. So the impact was this: in spite of the pandemic, in spite of having a very traditional way of doing it, during the course of this pandemic, they were able to disburse close to 1,331 crores worth home loan during this entire pandemic season when none of the offices were open. Right? It's got about 15,000 agents who are onboarded. It's got 1 million plus downloads on Google Play Store, right? And more than 50K applications were created using this. So these are some of the examples, and these are some of the other clients that we have been working with in the space of application modernization. So with that, I think I would now like to call upon, sorry. Yeah. So with that, I would like to, kind of call upon Pritam, right, where we could talk about a few of these different use cases that, or let's say, how Google has been playing a very vital role in the whole, modernization journey, right? So welcome, Pritam, and again, thanks a lot for joining in, right? So I tried covering some of the, what is modernization and why is it important, right? But if you could highlight us on, what are the key challenges that the customers face if they try to retain their monolithic application. So what exactly is the need for modernization from your point of view?
Yeah, thanks, Bharath. And it's a pleasure to be part of the webinar. So, Bharath, like we have interacted with a lot of customers as well in the recent past. Customers are looking out more from the operational efficiency as well, because if you look at legacy or monolithic application, they require a lot of operational effort, and that
Absolutely.
kills or takes away a lot of productive time of the developers who are looking the speed and more reliable way to roll out new changes, capability, or even for the small feature changes, something like those. So that's one of the area we see. And other area, the aspect which you really covered it well, Bharat, like is around the breaking down the silos to build a good amount of exposure. We call it a data culture, where how can you collaborate? There might be cases, as you rightly highlighted, you cannot move the legacy or containerize it, although you have a surrounding ecosystem where they can be containerized. In that case, how to build that integration pattern without breaking down the things, which is the key. So these two aspects we deal with the customers day in day out, and when you are looking for a transformation and innovation journey, it's no longer infrastructure, it's just the starting base to get you settled on the cloud, and we are there to help our customers and meet them wherever they are at the journey of modernization.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can think of two examples, right? This may be a very layman term. So if there are folks on this call for whom modernization is still not very clear on what it is, a simple use case, right? I think about a year ago or so before the pandemic, overnight there was this app called Face App, which became very famous,
Yep.
right? Where you upload a picture of yourself and it kind of shows you how you'd look, 50 years down the line or something, right? Now it was developed by some guy for just for fun, right? And you'd have hosted it probably on his own server or his own computer. Now, overnight, there is a load of millions of people downloading that particular app and trying out. And of course, it crashed. It had to crash. Right now, there is no way it was built to scale. Right. So that was a legacy application. Now, imagine same application thought through and built and hosted on a cloud, which is designed such a way that it's going to scale automatically on load. Any kind of loan could have been taken up by it, right? And that's what they eventually did. That's what was done. It
Yep.
was hosted on cloud. It was broken down into microservices. It had its own features. Features is to scale up and down, and they were able to scale as required. And this is exactly the problem what we see in some of the modern banks also that we are working with, right? So they have built, banks have a lot of departments. It could be savings, credit, payments, trade finance, etc. And
Yep.
every department has their own applications, and which were built ages ago. And of course, there is a core banking, but then these are all the other applications. But today, if they want to add more features to it, depending on whatever new regulations are, for example, video KYC. Right, during the
Yep.
pandemic, RBI said that yes, video KYC is legal and you can go ahead and do it. Now, plugging in a video KYC to a traditional system and trying to integrate it and hosting it within a quick span of time, where customers are waiting to utilize this, is a massive problem for them. But imagine if they have these, if they already modernized their applications and everything is containers and microservices, it's all about building a couple more microservices, adding them to the containers, and then deploying it without really impacting your customers who are already using your platform. So adding of features becomes much easier when you have a modernized framework in place.
Absolutely, Bharat. Can't
So
agree more.
yeah, absolutely. So that brings us to next question, Pritam. So while we know what are the challenges of monolithic applications, so now if what are the challenges that typically the organizations face when they decide to modernize their applications? Let's say they have like 50, 60, 70 applications, and now either there is a pressure from the management or they have finally realized that yes, cloud adoption or modernization is the way forward. Now, what are the key challenges do you think that they will face when they are to embark this whole modernization journey?
Yeah, and it's a valid thing, Bharat, and you covered it well as well in your slides. So when you look at understanding our IT landscape is the key. And it all starts like at each customer data center or the application landscape is completely unique, whether they're on-prem or might be located colo data center, might be on some public cloud or in any type of model deployment. So we need to understand what they have and what can be done. So like you did call out Statozone, so that tool gives you insights, and it's all data driven insights right from the customer's application landscape. And once that is done, the assessment, and we call it discovery and assessment, and then we can decide, okay, these are the applications which can be moved, because Statozone gives that insight saying that this can be a good fit for, let's say, GKE, which is our master product, right, from Google, where we open sourced it few years back and widely adopted. So this not only gives you the flexibility to approach the microservices and to, apart from being fully managed service, but also the developer productivity is significantly improved. And as well, they can get started easily because there's no new learning, and they can use the language of your choice. And let me quote an example, because these days we see a lot of traction on modernizing the Java apps, which has been somehow there for a long time, and people still are more Java oriented apart from the polyglot programming of likes of Ruby, Rails, and Go, and all those things, right? So we are helping our customers in that way as well. For instance, how they can get started, it is not required on the day one itself to modernize. They can move as it is to Google Cloud Virtual Machines, we call it GCE, and later on they might have approach in the phase wise where they can look up to containerize it. And you said like we follow something like 12 factor method, right? Very popular, where you can define and whether you want to go a stateless approach or you want to go a stateful application approach, right? And then you can do containerization. And the best part is the day one operation is done. What about the day two, which is your lifelong approach, right, which stays with you for the entire journey of the application lifecycle management? In that, it is very important to introduce CI/CD. And these Java applications which are complex, this can be streamlined with CI/CD approach, and we can look to modernize them, and of course deploy in the platform of choice. Might be they're looking to go with GKE, or might be Anthos, which is again a platform which can meet customers wherever they want, whether they want on-prem mode or hybrid or a multi-cloud, including AWS and Azure as well. So we can streamline the things so that a lot of effort is streamlined. And the best part is there is no extra learning curve, because these are all open source tool, no vendor lock-in, and anybody can get started. If they don't like GCP tools, they can also use open source tool and start for the automation, and have a reliable SRE, which is a strong practice we recommend to our partners, which you are already doing it also to the customers, so that they can automate the engineering processes and bring in that culture that will not only be cost effective as well as improve the productivity of the team, so that they focus more on the productive activity, writing good wow codes, and which will have a more business and meaningful impact.
Absolutely. I think you rightly called out the CIC, while application modernization is not restricted only to the app, right? So even the whole development cycle that is involved in, taking this, adding these features by the developers becomes an important factor. And that's where modernizing the whole CI/CD pipeline is also very important, right? Where, like I said, you could use the Google's repository source, you could use GitLab, you could use Bitbucket, wherever you are. How do I collaboratively integrate, and how this whole process is automated, right? Where there is unit test automation, right? Then there is code coverage check using open source tools like SonarQube and all that. And then finally, when it meets the right set of criteria, the code automatically gets deployed, from your UAT to production areas. And this is where we will see that there wouldn't be any kind of impact, or the area need, or the environment going down and coming up, where the existing clients are not impacted by it, right? So modernizing of your CI/CD pipeline, the whole microservices and the monitoring layer becomes a key factor. And Google has a very beautiful ecosystem of all the monitoring tools, right? There is you can integrate all the data that you have collected, with your own. Let's say you already have license for some of the monitoring tools, you can integrate these with them to continue using that. Or let's say I don't want to use that, I want to use the Google's ecosystem, I want to use the Dialogflow, the Data Studio to see how my containers are performing. I can integrate Data Studio, something which is offered free from Google. Or let's say I want advanced analytics where I can link all this data coming into BigQuery and then have Looker being implemented for any kind of advanced analytics, depending on the kind of workloads, right? So that's a very unique thing. So Pritam, I covered two use cases where we have predominantly helped in the BFSI sector, right? While we have done a lot of consulting on the migration or the modernization strategy, we have also built a lot of modern applications. right? So could you state one or two, case studies, let's say from BFSI or any other vertical, where modernization has actually added a lot of, value to the client in terms of, let's say, cost saving or the dynamic scalability, which they were not able to achieve earlier?
Yeah. So, Bharat, like I would to like to bring one more twist to this modernization. So, app mod is there, of course, and most of our customers are not aware, honestly, and it's more of awareness. Like GKE and Anthos, which holds the forte, but there are other use cases customers can get started apart from benefiting from the cost. Like Google offers not only virtual machine, that's the old era, and we call fully managed and serverless as the next virtual machines of the world. So let me quote an example like App Engine, very good platform, and lets the developer choose the platform of choice, language, runtime, and fully serverless, which scales from 0 to planet scale. It doesn't have any throttle or pre-warming required, which is very super useful service for the developers. And even cloud functions. If you look at the other cloud vendors, they offer you more of a event driven only. But Google Cloud gives you that. Plus, we often tend to forget what about the invoking request coming from HTTP functions. So that's one area is a very exciting area where our customers and developers are trying to build serverless IoT backends or a mobile IoT serverless backend, even lightweight digital transformation. And the best part, it's based on open source function as a service. So no vendor lock-in. You can move around the workload on-prem to might be to other clouds or might be to GCP if something is not happening you as per your expectations. So this is the areas we see. Plus, when you look at the modernization, right, irrespective of the data app or whatever it is always breaking down the silos and establishing something like a universal layer where you can stitch in the entire ecosystem. So let me quote an example. A lot of our customers have ERPs, might be SAP, might be non-SAP. The idea is when you're trying to build a data transformation or innovation journey or modernization, you are trying to enrich the existing data from all the ecosystem data. To do that, and the challenge with is every application talks in the native proprietary protocols. For example, so SAP is close to my heart, and which so I keep on quoting. And lot of the customers in the have this ERP as a by default, or might be legacy apps. They operate in their own proprietary protocols, like some BAPIs, OData, and all those things like intermediate docs. And this nobody like any developer would like to learn that because that's not their role. That role is used to a standardized API format. So with APG and APGX, which supports the hybrid model and multi-cloud model, that will streamline and give you a universal layer, and still your backend is not disrupted. Still their legacy might be a mix and match of microservices architecture, Kubernetes, containers, and might be on VMs. But for the external world, it's still a modern API layer, and the entry point is a universal gate. And the best part is if they're worried about being throttled or overwhelmed as a backend, because that might disrupt the internal users, which are still the primary stakeholders for any organization. Might be doing a invoice processing, might be updating customer records, right? In that way, it can give you a holistic view, at the same time give you a secure, robust platform with full control with the application owners. They know who is accessing my data and how can I embark on new business models apart from just establishing the integration layer seamlessly, new business models, and how can I handle the quota remit sometimes to meet Black Friday sales or Cyber Mondays. All those challenges can be mitigated, and
Absolutely.
and and whether you have SaaS, web apps, or legacy ERP, it doesn't matter honestly.
Absolutely. I think bang on. You mentioned APG and APGX, right? So I'd like to quote, a couple of use cases where we
Yeah.
are actually doing that. So if you are an organization who is having, let's say, it could be 20 APIs or 20,000 APIs, right? The traditional way of doing is having these REST APIs being directly called by the application or by the workload that is consuming it, right? And there is a lot of need today in the world of collaboration, right? Even the banks are collaborating with the other fintechs to get more business or to make it more accessible to the users, because it's a user driven market. Today we are not talking about how good is my product. Today we are talking about how the users can, what all features of my product can users use, right? That makes the product more impactful, right? So there is a need for us, for the organizations, whether they're traditional, whether they're modern cloud born or not, there is a need to collaborate. And when you are collaborating, the security or having the single source of truth or an entry point and exit point, or having that layer of API management becomes important, right? So a lot of organizations do use API gateways. But APG is a very unique offering, which is not just a gateway, it is an end-to-end API management platform, right? Where you can migrate your APIs, you can design, you can develop, you can secure, you can monitor, you can monetize your APIs all from a single layer. You can have multiple versions of the APIs being consumed by various business units within your team, right? And or you can expose them very securely, providing only that data what a third party would like to access from your things without really having any challenges. And APG is something which we have implemented in LIC Housing Finance. We are implementing it in a couple of other banks, and that's another backbone of modernization, right? To have a very strong API management strategy, you cannot have a modernization strategy without having an API management strategy, right? That goes hand in hand, and that is going to impact the way your APIs are being consumed, utilized, and even your scaling of your APIs depending on the load depends on how effectively you have implemented the whole management platform. Right. So since you mentioned that, I thought, and like I said, APGX is a brilliant, again, works on premises, works on a multi-cloud, collaborates very well with Anthos. So there is an entire ecosystem, designed for applications to scale and, perform, and also bring in that cost of utilization, as pay as you go, or pay only what you use for without really having to, rent anything. And there are various structures in it. Great. So that brings us to the next point, Pritam. So now let's say we understand what is the need for modernization, right? And what is modernization as on today's date? And let's say the organizations want to embark this journey, right? So we did speak about the discovery phase, the assessment phase, and the implementation phase, step by step, till we end up the managed services. So what are some of the best practices that you think that an organization or a company, or which wants to modernize and embark this journey should kind of keep in mind while they take this journey?
Yeah, it's very important to include the people and process and culture. So that's the first part when you start for a cloud or a modernization journey. Especially modernization and cloud are very correlated because that's where the entire gamut of options opens up for any enterprises, right?
Sure.
So when you're looking for modernization journey, it's very important to understand what is your vision and what is your plan to achieve that. Otherwise, if you don't have a proper plan and structure, it is just a dream or a wishful statement, right? To put a plan and framework, include your folks who are on the ground, who are going to be the core team members, whether they're developers, whether they're operators, like IT infrastructure management team, include them very start in the beginning rather than the late. And we see this impacts the entire or derails the entire process of modernization if they are not informed. And the second thing, as I said, once the discovery and assessment is done, and we should always, as I said, whether you move to cloud or modernization or digitalization with cloud, is always to start small and the start small and see and fail fast. Whatever the approach, whether we're doing just re-hosting or re-platforming, or might be your first step is just an infra modernization, and then is the app modernization. Then you might open up for integration with APG. Might be then start using some other world-class services like AI, ML, which Google has pioneered over 2 decades now. So that planning has to be there. And once you have done that, then is the process where the execution happens, and that holds the forte. So that's where we strongly recommend, like partners are you, who has been helping our customers in successful journey. The LIC one, a super example, because I was also involved in the some aspect while you executed the deal on the ground, Bharath, and it's a very good structure where you have quoted how to bring the modernization journey for a traditional customer like LIC, which you have never thought of initially, right? So
Absolutely.
these are some of the frameworks. It's Bharat, like it's technology can be there and no anybody can learn it. It's always about the people, process, culture, and also the identification, the right set of applications, whether they can be done. And let's say, for example, whether going for Java, as I quoted before, it's a slightly catch-22 situation. We don't know how whether everything in that Java application because of legacy can be modernized or not. The easier way, if somebody wants to get started, they should not be bottlenecked by just looking at containers and all those things. They should start with VMs. Probably as a next step, what they can do is at the simultaneously start a phase two while the applications are still running 24/7 on GCP or Google Cloud, and start of thinking refactoring the services. And those services can be easily integrated with our integrated API management tool, which is a full life cycle of with IPG. So these
Absolutely.
are some of the few steps to be taken care of. And my critical piece is always the people and the process and the culture are the integral part, and they should be well informed, well ahead when the entire journey is starting.
Absolutely. Bang on, Preetham. Like you said, it's a collaborative thing, right? So many a times application modernization is seen as a way of cost optimizing or reducing my IT spend. But if that it starts with that as a focus, you end up making a lot of mistakes there. But if you were to look at application modernization to bring in, let's say, the dynamic scalability, the advanced security, right, the agility into my systems, the go to faster to market strategy or speed that I'm looking at, or optimization I'm looking at, and then when we start doing these modernizations, your cost optimization comes as a back product or a byproduct of your
Correct.
application modernizations. And you will see, like, it always is there, right? When you start seeing it, you might feel like, oh, I'm spending more on cloud than I was spending on my on premises. Of course, if you were to move your existing applications as is and do a lift and shift, you will end up spending more, because you already had procured, you had your enough capex and opex already done for your servers, and you were running it, which was the most optimal thing. But now for scalability, when you move to cloud, initially you may feel like, yes, I'm spending more because you have moved a monolithic application as is to the cloud. You will start seeing the benefits, and by using all the ecosystem that the cloud has to offer, only when you modernize your applications, right? That is when all these other benefits start coming in, and cost optimization automatically happens there. So I think that's one of the key learning. And like you rightly said, the mindset and skill set become very important here, because a lot of the crowd that is already there has the traditional way of writing the applications, traditional way of coupling the front end and the back end and the databases very closely, right? So it becomes very important that they be trained, right? How to write these microservices, how to write APIs, how to segregate my front ends, how to write my micro front ends, so that all these becomes multiple small pieces which can integrate each other with each other and can be orchestrated beautifully, like using Kubernetes, right? Which gives us a lot of flexibility to remove features, add features, add more load, remove load, and make it a very dynamic and a very agile and then very open to acceptance kind of an application, which is the main benefit application modernization brings to the table.
Absolutely.
So I think we have covered most of the points that we wanted to as a part of this, which includes the challenges of the traditional monolithic applications. What is modernization? Why modernization? What benefits it can give the organizations, and what are some of the best practices need to be implemented, which was pretty much the agenda of this this particular webinar that we wanted to discuss about. We have covered a couple of case studies as well. Should there be any questions? I see there are about 76 attendees. So should there be any questions, please feel free to post it. We had reserved last 10 minutes for this Q&A session. So if there are questions, we'd be very happy to take them at this point of time. Please feel free to type it in the chat section or the Q&A section. And yeah, one point I would like to highlight is, application modernization need not, we did give a lot of examples about BFSI, because that's some of the areas which we have been working very closely with, but it is not restricted to that, right? We have seen modernization help, especially in the e-commerce space, healthcare space, manufacturing and retail space, typically where there are workloads and you have customers coming onto your applications where predictability of the number of users becomes a challenge, or you need to frequently push new and new features to keep the audience or the customers engaged. Modernization is the answer for most of these questions. All right, I see some people saying hello, good session, good afternoon, thank you, thanks for that. More than happy to take any questions. There is a question from Dinesh Rana which says, how do I know that my app needs modernization? Well, if you're having a traditional application, right, Dinesh, and let's say if you're able, okay, here is the thing. Modernization is not a must do for everyone, right? Let's say you have a small scale application which is being used by 10 to 15 members, for which you have set up your whole, the architecture for it, and you have hosted it on premises or whatever it is, and it's catering, and you're able to quickly add new features to it, etc., then there is no need to modernize at this point of time. But if you're looking at expanding whatever business you're into, right, and you feel that, okay, today there are 5 users and tomorrow there could be 100, 200 or 300, where you're seeing an exponential growth in the load, or let's say you have selected 20 or 30 features within this application. Tomorrow there is a need to add more and more features very quickly into this application, right? There is a need to have more, larger databases, more flexibility to this application. That's when I think you would have a need to modernize it, right? So rather than waiting till you reach that stage where you want to modernize, if you can restructure or modernize your existing architecture itself into a modernized application and host it on cloud, you can still continue doing what you're doing. And tomorrow, should there be an increase in the load or need to add features, it will be much more easier for you to do that, rather than waiting for it and then doing it there. Yeah, so there's one question on what are the distinguished features of GCP that keeps apart from AWS or Azure. I think one is which we covered, Bala Sahib, that is Anthos, right? So Anthos is a very unique offering from Google Cloud, which says, we're not trying to compete here or anything, right? You may have your workloads on premises, it could be on AWS, could be on Azure, but currently you will have to manage the configurations of it separately in each of these areas. But if you were to start using Anthos, you will be able to manage all your workloads from one single, pane, right? Or one single control room, which is a very unique offering. Apart from that, GCP has a lot of options like pay as you go. It has sustained user discount, committed user discounts, right? And another unique thing is the kind of ecosystem it has with respect to the AI ML capabilities, the various APIs. It could be Translate API, it could be the chatbot like Dialogflow, which is there, and the API management gateway like APG, your analytics platform like Looker. So all these ecosystem would be just a click of a button away for you to integrate with your current application and start using it. So these are two things which I feel are the differentiators. Pritam, feel free to add any other from your
Yeah,
end.
I think Bharat, you covered it well. As you rightly said, for Google Cloud, it always has been to meet wherever the customer on the journey to want to get started, whether they're new to cloud or might be new to GCP, or they're midway with hybrid model or with some other cloud. When the option customers are looking at with the recent research from Forresters and Gartners, they have called out multi-cloud and hybrid cloud is here to stay. So we understand that, as you rightly said, we started in 2019 with Anthos. It's a 100% software solution. Unlike other vendors, there are CSPs rather, they have the solutions, but it requires a proprietary appliance. Our is 100% software. It can cater to any customer's requirement in the hybrid or multi-cloud model. And of course, for the AI ML, Google has been pioneering that for more than 2 decades. And that gives a clear edge to us. In that, what it means is to build a strong data culture for the modernization journey. We are trying to help the customers, the likes of BigQuery, which is serverless, focus on the data, power of SQL, and get started with not only insights, bring the power of ML to the big data warehouse or BigQuery offering instead of exporting the data, which is again a pain area. And of course, like AI ML, we have seen a lot of customers still are business users because that still holds the larger amount of user base. We don't want to restrict them this beautiful technology to data steward or data scientist. If they're data steward and scientist, TensorFlow, which was born in Google, it is there for them, or might be scikit-learn or PyTorch, something on those lines.
True.
But if they are new and they're willing to take that new milestone with a new domain knowledge, they can get started with predefined APIs, which are pre-packaged bundles like so Vision and all those things. So video intelligence APIs, natural language processing, or if they're somewhere in between, we have AutoML, which is a pre-trained custom machine learning models. Just they can get started. Similarly, a lot of other things like collaboration, which is the other thing, is one of the things where in this world, when people are looking to stay virtually connected, like work from home, is going to be the new norm, and it is here to stay. So in
Absolutely.
that areas, how can you get started in low bandwidth, have a real-time collaboration? Google Meet, we call it Google Workspace now, rebranding of G Suite. That has been helping our customers a lot. And similarly, and most of the products, the best part is are battle tested. It's not like these are just launched for the customers. We are a frontline users as a Googler, as a Google employee rather, and we use it. And we have lots of employees, right? I don't remember the count. And our strong partners ecosystem, they have used it and they have battle tested it. So customers can embark this journey of modernization and innovation with us with seamlessly and friction free. And of course, let's not forget, Google is just one entity in the Alphabet Inc. Once you embark Google, it unlocks the entire gamut of options for you, especially trying to integrate data points with maps or the other platform like YouTube, search, and all those things is possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. I see another question from Mr. Ashok Srivatsav, right? Is asking, in the era of demand-led education versus earlier supply-led education, how is technology helping? So a simple answer is the platform. We are using Zoom here, but yes, Google has very very specific things in edutech space, right? Well, Google Classroom is an example. In fact, Google Meet has been used very efficiently during the entire pandemic for taking the education to the houses of the students, right? Where the educators were at their homes, the students were at their homes, and Google Meet has been very effectively being used. And in the background, whether it's Google Meet or any of these Google products that you are using for your educational purposes, they all in the background have a very modernized architecture, which we spoke about. There are microservices, there are images, there are containers which are running in the background, hosted on various data centers of Google, in order to ensure that you have a seamless supply of an uninterrupted classroom session. Other than that, we have been helping clients host their applications or workloads which are into proctoring, right? We have this Vision API which is used to scan your documents and come up with anomalies in it, right, for onboarding of your students. Then there is a whole proctoring systems which have been developed and hosted on Google Cloud, which take care that an online examination happens without any kind of a fraud. I can't name the client, but we have hosted all their workloads who are using the computes, the databases which are there on Google Cloud, right? Apart from that, yes, I think Google Workspace is a great example for collaborating within the education space, right? Today, I can open a slide or a document, and then I can have multiple people it being shared with them with the restricted access on how it has to be accessed, and multiple people editing it at the same time, making your projects, which the students do in a very collaborative way from anywhere in the world. They don't have to be physically be sitting together to do it. So those are some of the areas. Google Classroom has its own unique offerings. Maybe we could, have a separate discussion on that, depending on the kind of folks we have. But yes, I hope that kind of answers your question, Mr. Ashok. Dharma is asking, what are the efficiency parameters you measured? A couple of minutes ago in my presentation, I did cover, I spoke about something called as the modern framework, MODRN, right? So let me quickly reiterate that if that helps. One is speed to market, which means we are going to measure the release cycle time, frequency of releases, and the lead time. Next is the optimized spend, percentage of IT spend that is going into your infrastructure. Your dynamic scalability, which means how quickly can your, how is your resource scalability, and what is your infrastructure change quotient. Next is your adherence to compliance and your security breach cycle. Next is the net availability, which includes the application failure rate, the restoration rate, and the MTTD and MTTR. So these are the key parameters which would help us measure whatever we have modernized to whatever legacy systems we had. Hope that answers. Okay, I think we have pretty much come to an end. We can take one more question. Yeah, thanks, Ashok. Thanks, Dharma. I think we were able to answer those questions. I think there's time for one more question. So if there is any question, please pose it, and we'll try our best to answer that. Even if there are other questions which we couldn't cover, or any other topics that you would want us to share use cases or anything, please feel free to reach out to us. Our IDs are shared, I think, in the invites that you had got, and we'd be more than happy to get back to you with an answer on that. Great. If there are no more questions, then I think we can call it. I think it was great, Pritam. Thanks a lot for your time. I know this was a very impromptu discussion that we had, but I think we have tried and addressed most of the areas, most of the questions which the traditional companies would have, or traditional corporates would have around the app modernization space, addressing the what, why, how, and the what next on the modernization space. So thanks a lot, Pritam, for your time, and thanks to all the 70, 80 plus participants who have listened to us patiently for the last 50, 55 minutes. And thanks for asking these questions. Hope we were able to clear at least some of the doubts, and start, at least pump you to start your modernization journeys.
Yeah, thanks, Bharath. I really appreciate the time, and it was very fruitful discussion as well.
Great. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Stay safe, and thanks for your time. See you.